Hello everyone, my name is Michael Cassman, and I am a copywriter specializing in writing persuasive and compelling copy for all verticals. And today I'd like to share with you the 3 C's of killer copywriting. These are the 3 most valuable principles I've received throughout my studies of advertising, salesmanship, and the art of persuasion. You can take hours and hours of courses and spend your whole life reading all of the books written on the topic. But having learned from some of the best teachers out there, I've condensed into 3 simple points the bare essentials of writing persuasive and effective copy. What's more is that these principles aren't just specific to copywriting. Said very simply, these are just principles of salesmanship. They can be applied anywhere and everywhere through any medium. Anytime you want to sell something, you can use these principles to give you the best chance of closing that deal, whether it's selling your company's product, selling your idea to your inner circle, or selling yourself to a prospective employer in hopes of landing that new job. Whether in your personal or professional life, the art of salesmanship has incredible application because it draws from perennial principles of human psychology. A lot changes throughout time, but humans are still very much the same. The techniques that were used to sell a used chariot in ancient Rome can still be used to sell a widget today. With all that being said, let's jump right in. The first C, conversation. One of the biggest and most common mistakes in modern advertising is to forget that advertising is about a conversation between the one making the offer and the one potentially accepting the offer. In this technological age, we are saturated in bad advertising. We see ads constantly, and yet how many do we actually remember? When was the last time you said, "Wow, that was a great ad. I can't wait to get a hold of that product"? We've become so accustomed to bad advertising that we almost tune out advertising altogether. This problem of bad advertising usually comes from ads simply being irrelevant. The most common cause is when a company starts to see either itself or its consumer base as some sort of a vague, amorphous, distant, and non-personal entity that can only communicate through vague and non-personal terms. Instead of speaking directly to an individual, they try to speak to a collective group of mostly different but somehow similar people. This view doesn't reflect reality, and it comes off as an easily ignored, annoying, and irrelevant ad. Even if 1,000 or 100,000 or 1,000,000 people see your ad, each encounter is still one real individual person reading your one ad. And so you have to write your ad as if you were writing it to an individual person. When writing an ad, the rules for a one-on-one face-to-face conversation are still applicable insofar as it is possible. You want to know if an ad is any good? Read it out loud and gauge whether or not it sounds like something you would actually say to a normal human being. Why would you write to someone in a way that you would never imagine speaking to them? It doesn't make any sense. Unfortunately, it's the norm in our current advertising world. As the greatest copywriters and salesmen continue to say, the world is starving for good advertising. Just avoiding this one mistake will set you apart from the crowd. Here's how you can avoid it. The first step is knowledge. In advertising, knowledge is power, and it's incredible how often it's ignored. First, you have to know yourself. What is the essence of your company? What makes you special or different from the rest? Why should anybody buy from you instead of the other guys who offer something similar to yours? It's amazing how common it is for you to ask someone, "What's so special about your company? Why are you any different?" And there's no answer, or the answer is irrelevant. It's important to have a very precise knowledge of why you're better than the rest. Next, you have to be very precise about what you're offering. And it's a shock to most people when they learn that the product is not really what they're offering to people. What they're offering is what the product will do for those people. If someone is selling a tire, they're not just selling a piece of rubber. That's what the product is. What they're selling is getting that man to work, or getting his children to soccer practice, or going on a sightseeing adventure around the country. That's the product, not the tire. Lastly, you need to know to whom you are offering this product. And this point is so important that it deserves its own major point. Knowing your customer. It's also shocking how few businesses actually know their customers. They simply know them as a number, or as the big group of individuals that buys our stuff. This is not who your customer is. You need to get into the mind of your average prospect. You need to know how he thinks and how he feels. What are his hopes, fears, dreams, and desires? You even need to be able to visualize your average prospect so that you can literally imagine a conversation that you're having with this person to convince him to buy your product. If you don't know him to that degree, how can you possibly speak to him in a way that will convince him to buy what you're offering? Is your prospect old or young? Is he a man or a woman? Is he healthy or sick, happy or depressed? All of this matters very much when it comes to fashioning a narrative to pitch a product to your prospect. And if it's irrelevant to him, just like all of the other ads that are pouring into us at every moment, your ad will simply be disregarded and forgotten. Once you have a vivid picture of your prospect, only then can you meet him where he is and have a friendly conversation that will really hit home. Every new prospect is your new best friend. Empathize with him, listen to him, think like him, and offer him exactly what he needs in the way he needs to hear it. Every time a prospect reads an ad, there's a conversation going on in his own head, and he's raising dozens of questions or objections against you and your product. You need to anticipate and answer those questions or objections and join in on that conversation. If you don't, the interaction will be two one-sided conversations and it will go nowhere. For example, if your prospect is likely to make the objection, "Your product is more expensive. Why on earth should I pay you more?" You need to answer that in your ad. If you try to gloss over it, nobody's going to answer it for him, and you probably won't make the sale. The second C, craft a story, paint a picture. Don't just tell your prospects about your product, show them. Paint pictures in their mind. Using the aforementioned knowledge that you have of yourself, your product, and your prospect, you can begin to create a story that will captivate your prospect and lead them to the final and only logical conclusion that they must take you up on your offer. Your pitch must be interesting and compelling. How do you do that? Here are two things that will help you. First, use real stories from real people. There's something very deep in the human psychology that makes us really connect with stories and examples. Instead of saying, "Our service does this great thing," say, "We helped Bob do this, and now he's able to do that even better." People love to know that there are real people out there who are better off for having done business with you. It will make them far more likely to do the same. Style. Your style needs to be clear, crisp, and concise. Attention spans are shorter now than ever. If you don't grab somebody's attention in the first 6 seconds, you're going to lose them. And if at any point in your narrative they ask themselves, "Why do I even care about this?" you've lost them. It's a delicate and a tricky thing keeping your prospect on the line, but it's not impossible. Here are a couple of tips. First, use power words. Power words provoke an emotional response in the reader. Avoid going flat. Go for color, imagery. Instead of saying "make more money," say "boost your profits." Instead of "outdo your competitors," say "smash the competition." Instead of "exceed expectations," write "shatter the glass ceiling." Place a big emphasis on verbs and powerful adjectives. Take this sentence. The suspicious man walked down the poorly lit street. Compare that with, the vagrant sauntered under the cover of night. One of these falls flat. The other is colorful and thought-provoking, and includes all sorts of nuances that are utterly lacking in the other. Remember that time is precious in advertising. Every word has to earn its place. Usually, the more concise an idea, the better. Now, that doesn't mean that every ad has to be short. In fact, there's a saying in advertising, the more you tell, the more you sell. More detail can easily generate more interest, but only if it's relevant. Give details, but don't linger. Keep the train moving so that your reader keeps his eyes moving down the page. Think of it like a ladder. If you've got a 20-foot ladder, but it's only got 5 rungs, what person's going to try to climb that ladder? But if you have 20 rungs on it, well, now anybody with basic ability and a shred of desire can make it to the top. It's the same with long copy. People will read and love every word of a 20-page ad as long as it's relevant and keeps them moving. The moment the momentum stops, it's game over. Also, don't be afraid to put character into your writing. Your character, as a unique individual, is your secret weapon in your sales copy. Don't be afraid to give humanity to your writing. Most people write flatly, vaguely, and detached from reality. Readers pick up on that and quickly toss their stuff in the trash. Especially if you're in a market with institutionalized lingo where many others are offering similar products using similar words, adding character to your copy will instantly set you apart. And despite our technological age, people still prefer humans to AI. Let your readers know that there's another human being behind what they're reading, who's interested and interesting. The third C, close the deal and close it fast. This is another area where many people stumble. If you've done so well as to get your prospect to the final step of the salesman's process, making the sale and closing the deal, and you mess it up there, it's a little tragic. It costs you hardly anything to capitalize on all of the work you've already done. It's important to really make this last step as easy, painless, and as fast as possible. There are many people, even in business, who are simply not good at this, simply because they're afraid of making people feel uncomfortable by closing the salesman's process. And so they sell from the heels, not really wanting to push the sale, trying to give the customer every excuse to not buy the product. This is completely upside down. If your product is really as good as you say that it is, you want that person to have it. Their life will be better off with it. They will have been better off buying it from you than if they hadn't. Therefore, you should do everything you can to help improve their life by selling them that product. Yet, closing the deal is extremely delicate and requires great care and attention. Here's some of the best advice. First, shoulder all the burden. If the guy has gone through your whole pitch, remove any risk from him and take it upon yourself. Take away any reason he might have to refuse to buy from you. Offer him a money-back guarantee. Offer to delay payment for a month so that he can have a free trial using the product for free. Insist that he return the product if he's not happy at any time. Create urgency. The window for closing the deal is very narrow. It's important to light a fire under the prospect to help him buy. Give him a limited time offer with a temporary discount. At this point, don't even be afraid to throw in the kitchen sink by adding additional bulk and value to the offer without increasing the price. At this point in the sale, your prospect is sitting on a fence, and there's very little holding him back. You need to do whatever it takes to push him over the edge. Finally, and most importantly, a good salesman always remembers the golden rule. Hard selling is not good salesmanship. It should be a privilege for your prospect to do business with you. Treat them as you'd like to be treated, and they'll respect you and happily pay you for improving their life in whatever way that you do. Be kind, genuine, respectful, and honest. Never underestimate the power of honesty in advertising. Most people try to overemphasize the good aspects of their products and conceal the defects. While this technique isn't technically lying, it's not entirely honest. Readily admitting the limitations of your product or even a flaw or two can actually shine a light on the best qualities of your product. And it will also distinguish you from the vast majority of other advertisers. It will lend you credibility and build up your reputation as a real, open, and trustworthy friend, not just a salesman. Final remarks and closing takeaways. I truly believe that the 3 C's that I've shared with you can be reduced to 1. And if there's one thing that I want you to take away from this webinar, it's this: conversation. When pitching a product to a prospect, I constantly think, how would I offer this to someone if I were meeting him face to face? Who really is this person that I'm talking to? How should I speak to them? How would I offer to them what I know they need? Given what I know about them, what's the best way to explain this or that thing? Everything comes back to the fact that as advertisers, we need to speak to the person in front of us. We need to identify them, empathize with them, and offer them what they need as a friend would. The key to good copywriting is ultimately contained in conversing with and caring about our fellow man. To help me represent this in my own mind, I've created what I jokingly call the salesman's love triangle. This triangle represents the movement of a conversation between seller and consumer through an advertisement. On the left side of the triangle, we have the seller. On the right side, we have the prospect. In the middle, on the bottom line, we have the product. And this middle ground is the bare minimum of what is required for an exchange of goods. If you were to put it into words, basically it would be the seller saying to the prospect, "Hey prospect, I've got a pretty cool product." But that's rarely enough to actually make an exchange of goods, and it requires a good deal more to have someone buy from you. And that additional effort is found at the apex of this triangle. At the apex, we find the advertisement, which is the beautiful sweet spot where the needs of the customer are expressed and addressed by the ad produced by the seller. The ad serves as the meeting point between the buyer and the seller that leads the buyer to the product and leads profit back to the seller. The seller makes an inward and upward movement towards the consumer, and the consumer makes an inward and upward movement towards the seller, and they meet in the middle ground where the ad unites them and brings them together. That is ultimately what salesmanship is about. A union between the seller and the prospect through the product and what the product does for the prospect.